Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Connor, and welcome to another edition of Ask Megan. In an effort to try and answer some questions from a lot of different viewers and listeners that I have gotten regarding the Daybell trial, I'm going to dig into a little rabbit hole that I went down yesterday. I didn't have time to record an episode yesterday, so I'm addressing this today. I know there's some other news and other questions that I probably need to get to, but I wanted to get this out first. So last week during the trial, on the day when all of the financials and statistics were being presented, it was a pretty dry day for a lot of reasons, but I thought it was really important. If you want to know what someone's priorities are, look at their spending habits and their financials. And I think there was a lot of revealing information there. The main thing that stood out to me more than anything else, however, was the revelation that Daybell bought his first burner phone on October, I want to get the date right, October 3rd of 2018. And the reason that's significant is because Lori and Chad did not meet in person until October 26th, I believe, is when the Preparing a People conference was that they went to. And that was the first time that they met in person. However, knowing that Chad bought a burner phone on October 3rd clicked together some pieces in my mind. And it really tells me that Chad and Lori's in-person meeting was premeditated and that they had been conversing for a really long time before that in-person meeting. And I'll tell you why I think that's true. I talked about this on an episode of Web Sleuth that I went on last week with Lauren Matthias of Hidden True Crime, so you can go check out that episode for some of my preliminary thoughts, but this is going to be much more of a deep dive. Now, first of all, I don't want to disparage anybody who uses burner phones or they're actually prepaid phones where you just pay for the minutes rather than having a monthly set plan. Plenty of people do that. I'm not saying anything wrong about or anything bad about people who have prepaid phone plans. However, if you have an established phone number that you are paying monthly on and you go to get a prepaid phone, there are only a few reasons why you would do that. And I know some people have one phone for work and one phone for personal things. And I'm not saying anything bad about people who have more than one cell phone. However, in this case, Chad was working for a publishing company. There was really no reason for him to have a separate phone for work unless he wanted to communicate clandestinely with somebody without Tammy knowing about it or without anybody else knowing about it. When we say this was Chad's first burner phone, it was the first of many. We had 9 telephone numbers that were associated with Chad Daybell between 2018 and 2020. And that is an unusually high number, even for somebody who is trying to use one cell phone for work purposes and one cell phone for personal purposes. Now, we know that Lori started reading Chad's books back in 2017. So it was a long time between when she started reading Chad's books and when she actually met him in person. And we also know from the testimony that was given on that same day that on November 1st of 2019, Chad resigned his position with AVOW. Now, that may seem insignificant to some people because they may not understand what AVOW is, but that is why I want to go down this rabbit hole with you today, because AVOW, I believe, is where Chad and Lori met and where they cultivated their relationship. AVOW is an online forum. It's a discussion forum for a particular interest group, and we'll go over exactly what that is. But Chad was working for AVOW. He was writing articles for them, and he was putting all of his content up on the AVOW website. And Christopher Parrett, who is the owner of the AVOW website, was putting Chad's material behind a paywall, along with Julie Rowe's material, which if you've done any digging into who Julie Rowe is, she is another one of these people with extreme religious beliefs who also was excommunicated from the LDS Church because of some of the things that she was doing and saying. Now, Chad and Julie had a lot in common. Chad published Julie's books on near-death experiences, and Julie Rowe was actually another person that Chad told that Tammy was going to die prematurely. Julie has made an assertion that Chad Daybell assaulted her, and we actually have testimony that Chad was flirting with her and was trying to have some kind of a relationship with Julie Rowe. So we know that they were working closely together for a very long time. It wasn't until Julie Rowe's books started to gain some success and notoriety that Chad started talking about his own experiences as being true and as being near-death experiences. Now, that information comes from an interview with Heather Daybell, which was done by Lauren Matthias at Hidden True Crime. It's the only major interview that she's done, I believe, and I will put the link to that interview in the show notes down here. It's a very, very important interview. If you don't know much about Chad Daybell, Heather has the most credible and firsthand information to give about the entirety of this case involving Chad. So back to Chad and Julie Rowe putting their content up on the AVOW website behind a paywall. There are places on the AVOW website where you can communicate with people in small groups or privately or in a public forum. So we're going to go for just a second and check out this AVOW website. I want you to be able to see exactly what's going on there. So it says prepare for tomorrow today. We have 182,000 topics and 20,000 members on our online forums. There's preparedness, and then they have a store where you can buy prepping information or buy prepping materials. So if we go and look at their mission over here, teaching preparedness, and then dreams and visions, how interesting. Long have prophets prophesied of dreams and visions regarding the end times. We can all receive revelation and strengthen each other's own faith through sharing and pondering that revelation. So this is a big part of the AVOW website. There's also a section on overcoming fear and panic, conversation and discussion, spiritual preparedness, and fortifying your faith. Now, you can get on here. You can download a free copy of this. You can join the website and you can sign up for their newsletters. Now, I have a friend who has sent me some newsletters from these from the AVOW website, and there's a newsletter that goes out that is just sort of a it's a summary of the most popular topics from the following week or from the previous week. So I put this, it's just an email that just lists all of the most popular topics from that week. So this is from last week. The top 3 topics are church news. There was an article from the First Presidency about covenants. There's an attack on our farmers and food supply, which was written by Christopher Parrett. And then the third is Second U.S. Civil War becoming increasingly plausible as more insurrections are likely. This was the third most popular topic on the AVOW website last week. I went ahead and read through the rest of the topics that are listed on this email, and 19 of them are war updates, all at the very top of the most popular topics. 14 of them are about prepping, but those were all at the bottom, the least popular topics. There were 6 shocking videos being discussed, 5 articles on economy being discussed, and 1 from the church news. There's another article about the fundamental unraveling of America. So you can see what the most important things are that people are talking about on this website. And it's not all prepping. Most of it is war, fear-mongering, talks about civil war and things like that. So you can see it's not just a prepping community, and it's a little bit problematic. So I wanted to know a little bit more about AVOW and how it got founded, and about preparing a people and how it got founded, because these are the fringe conferences that Chad and Lori were attending together. They met at a Preparing a People conference, but I believe that they were chatting privately and in small groups on the AVOW website for a very, very long time before they met in person. And so if Lori started reading the books in 2017, I believe that was probably very early on in 2018 when she looked up Chad Daybell and found out how to get in touch with him and started talking with him on the AVOW website. Then Chad, they knew that there was this Preparing a People conference. They made plans to meet there. And then about 2 weeks before the conference happened, Chad went out and bought a burner phone. I think he bought that specifically for the purpose of talking privately with Lori. And by the time they got to the conference, they already knew each other. They had already spent extensive time talking online. So it makes a lot more sense in the timeline of these crimes and everything that happened and how quickly it escalated, knowing that they already had been in touch with each other pretty heavily online prior to meeting in person. So I wanted to know a little bit more about Preparing a People, but I couldn't find any information on them because they've changed their name. And so I wanted to go and look up, I did this Preparing a People search, and I want to show you what I found. And this is kind of where the rabbit hole started. So let me move this down. So I just typed in Preparing a People, and I came across this website called FAIR, Faithful Answers Informed Response. Now, as a former member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I knew what FAIR was. It is sort of an apologetic website. It is made up of and run by people who are trying to defend the church's truth claims. So I went to Wikipedia, and despite its sort of reputation for not having the best information in the world, it does give a really good summary over here that FAIR was founded in 1997 in Redding, California. You can see the members here, and their revenue in 2019 was $306,000. Well, from there, I said, and guys, this is just how my ADHD works. I'm sorry, I wasn't taking my medicine yesterday. From there, I was like, $306,000 in 2019. I wonder who is funding this website. Well, I personally, from my other information, that I suspected for a long time that Fair Mormon, it used to be called Fair Mormon, and it used to be called Faithful Apologetics and Informed Response, and they changed it to Faithful Answers. And it used to be called Fair Mormon, but then Russell M. Nelson, who is the president of the Corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, declared that using the word Mormon was a victory for Satan. And even though the Mormon Church spent millions and millions of dollars on a campaign to say, I'm a Mormon, and to have an I'm a Mormon website, and to encourage all of its members to go on the I'm a Mormon website and post their testimony, when Russell M. Nelson took over as president, he decided that he didn't want anybody to say the word Mormon. And so he started asking everybody to use the full name of the church, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, ostensibly because he wanted people to know that Jesus Christ was in the name, because people were calling Mormons not Christian. So I suspected for a long time that FAIR was funded by the Mormon Church somehow surreptitiously. So I did some more information on that. And I came across this blog, which was written by David Twede, and I hope I'm getting that pronunciation right. So the More Good Foundation is a nonprofit organization that helps Mormons share their beliefs on the internet so interested people can learn more about Mormonism. Now, stay with me for a second. I know we're not talking about necessarily the LDS Church. We're just talking about the foundation called the More Good Foundation. And the reason we're talking about it is going to come back around in just a minute. So it was created in 2005 by David Neeleman, who's the founder of JetBlue Airways. What do they do to share their Mormony beliefs? They buy a lot of domains on the internet. They own, which means they've registered these domain names and parked them with no content, over 1,300 web domain names, of which 400 are pro-LDS websites. From tax records, it appears in 2007 alone, they spent over $140,000 purchasing domains and websites, most of which are believed by the foundation to paint the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in a negative light. Now, why would you want to buy domain names that paint your organization in a negative light? Well, you want to prevent anybody from buying that domain name and then posting negative information there about the church. So they gathered up all of these websites in an effort to prevent people from using names on their website that are not flattering to the church. So I'm going to scroll down here just a little bit, where it talks about the tax returns of the More Good Foundation. The More Good Foundation says that it's fully supportive of the church and its mission. But it's not directed by or funded through the church. No church funds are used for the foundation. However, Future Missionary reports that their tax returns tell a different story. Now, Future Missionary has some links here, but they are not active links. And I haven't been able to find any more information on Future Missionary as of yet. But Future Missionary found that starting in 2009, there were yearly donations of between $100,000 and $200,000 to the More Good Foundation from the LDS Foundation of the LDS Church. Over 3 years, donations from the LDS Foundation to the More Good Foundation totaled $450,000. Now, if you go to 990 Finder, it's a really good place to find information about nonprofit organizations and see their financials. Okay. Effectively, he's saying the LDS Foundation of the LDS Church looks a little like a money laundering organization. Now, we didn't say it was, we said it looks like it. He says, however, I won't go so far as to say it's a facade for LDS activity, but I'm sure that David Nealman coordinates with a general authority, GA stands for general authority, regularly about the foundation's activity. Now, I can confirm, for example, when you're a prominent member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there is an apostle that, and by prominent member, I mean somebody who donates a lot of money to the church. If your donations to the church in tithing and donations totals more than $1 million a year, there is an apostle of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who is assigned to go out and meet with those members and convince them to give even more money. So if David Nealman has a foundation that is raising money, that is promoting the church interests, you can bet that there's a general authority that meets with him regularly about how that foundation should be spending its money. And so it's just a well-known fact in the LDS Church. I don't have receipts on that one, but it's on my list of things to investigate at some point. It's a long list, you guys. So, I want to say, going down here, it says of interest is that in 2009, 2010, and 2011, the LDS Church was the largest single donor to the LDS Foundation. Previously, it had been Nealman himself, and there are links to the data below. Another note of interest, FAIR. Now, here's where we get back to FAIR Mormon or FAIR LDS, which is the website where I found the AVOW information. Okay, stay with me, you guys. FAIR, the apologetic organization run by Scott Gordon, received $2,500 from More Good, the More Good Foundation, the one we've been talking about, in 2006. If you total the contributions and subtract the expenses for salaries in the latter years, you will see that most of the foundation money goes to pay salaries of the directors and officers. Very little seems to go elsewhere. So the LDS Church is actually mostly donating to pay the salaries of the foundation employees. Why would they do that? Now, it can be argued that the LDS Foundation of the LDS Church is not owned by the LDS Church. The address listed for this group is 150 Social Hall Avenue, Salt Lake City, Suite 500. Not only is the building the same, but the same Suite 500 is also the listed address of the beneficial life insurance company, which is owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So let me see if I can get out of this really quick. I clicked on that so that you could see it a little bit better, but now I need to go back and try to get out of it. Back to, sorry, you guys. Sometimes this takes me a little while. Oh, shoot, I lost my blog. I lost my Blogspot tab. Let me see if I can get it back up here really quick. Okay, sorry about that, you guys. Sharing screen. 1 second. Okay, so back to this. Not only is the building the same, Suite 500 is Beneficial Life Insurance Company, which is owned by Beneficial Financial Group, a Deseret Management Corporation, which is a wing of LDS Incorporated. In other words, we can be very sure that these donations to the More Good Foundation are from LDS Inc. Now, you guys, I just want to pause for 1 second. I don't know of any other nonprofit organization that is so sneaky with their finances as the LDS Church. I certainly don't know any other churches that are more sneaky with their finances. Go back through this with me real quick. This is like 4 layers deep over here, okay? LDS Incorporated owns Deseret Management Corporation, which is the wing of the church that pays for the Deseret News and a bunch of other things. Okay. They also own Beneficial Financial Group, which is a life insurance company. Well, sorry, Beneficial Financial Group is a conglomerate one wing of which is a life insurance company. Now we know that tithing dollars were used to bail out the beneficial life insurance company when it was having financial difficulties. And there's been a lot of controversy over that. So in the same office building and the same suite as beneficial life insurance company is the LDS Foundation of the LDS Church. So basically, there are 4 different layers over here that are trying to protect us from knowing that the More Good Foundation is actually funded by the LDS Church. But the More Good Foundation is, in fact, indirectly 4 layers down funded by the Mormon Church. Okay. This foundation's also been linked to Deseret Management Corporation by the Deseret News, the company that oversees the foundation. The reason it's important is because it shows that the LDS Church is paying for the defensive positions against critics by using apologetic agents, something that they deny doing. So the way that we're tracking this all the way back is that Fair Mormon, which is the apologetic arm of the church, which comes out with all of this information to try and combat negative publicity about the church, is in fact being funded indirectly by the LDS Church. And the reason that's important is because I'm going to show you what Fair Mormon writes about preparing a people, what they write about AVOW, and what they write about Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow. All of the financial information is detailed here. There are receipts, there are PDFs attached. You can dig into that if you want to. I spent some time on here before I realized I needed to come up from the rabbit hole and go do something different. So now we're going to go back to the Fair Mormon website. And when I was searching for preparing a people, this was the first hit that came up. And when I clicked on the page, I was shocked to find that preparing a people tab is a subtopic on the Lori Vallow-Daybell trial page. I had no idea that this existed until yesterday. And when I started to read through it, you guys, I got super angry because all this time I've been saying that the church has been distancing itself from this case. They have been very silent about what their view is about Lori and Chad. I've been advocating for the church to come out and denounce these fringe prepper groups and to denounce Lori and Chad's teachings and to warn people against straying away from the mainstream church and coming up with revelations on their own. And this whole time, they actually have been doing it, but they've been doing it through Fair Mormon. They've been distancing themselves from these groups through Fair Mormon. So they won't directly come out and denounce any of this because that's much too dangerous for them to do. Because when they do that, they risk alienating a huge group of the Mormon church that actually does latch on to these fringe groups. So I'm going to go back to screen sharing and we're going to dig into this, what they say about preparing a people. Actually, I think I want to go back and what they say about the Vallow-Daybell trial first. Well, I don't know. Which do I want to do first? You guys tell me. The trial? I feel like the trial's more important. Let's do that. Okay. Sorry, I've got my notes in 5 different places in true ADHD form. Okay. This is a fact check. They call it a fact check. Daybell and Vallow's beliefs are not taught by the church or its leaders. Leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have consistently taught its members to avoid fundamentalism and extremism. And that is true to some degree. They will pay lip service to that in conference. They will say, we should avoid extremes. We shouldn't go back and dig through old teachings and things like that. But they will not directly say, avoid this fundamentalist group, avoid this fundamentalist teacher, person. They won't denounce a particular person from the pulpit in Salt Lake City, which they speak to the members twice a year over the course of a weekend. It's, something like 30 hours worth of content. So they could say something at one of those, on one of those talks. So it goes back and it reviews the case a little bit over here. And then it says, our scriptures condemn murder, encourage all to proclaim peace. Some who are unfamiliar with the church and its teachings may think the Daybell case shows we're violent extremists or that we encourage others to do so, but nothing could be further from the truth. This is where I started to get angry, you guys, so forgive me if I go on a little bit of a rant through some of this. No basis in church doctrine or teachings. Absolutely untrue. Daybell and Vallow claimed their ideology and actions were based on church teachings, but they improperly used and twisted obscure, possibly inaccurate historic statements instead of mainstream reliable sources. Now, I do agree. They improperly used things, they twisted things, but these were not obscure historic statements. These are mainstream beliefs, and we've discussed that. I actually went on Mormon Stories with Lauren Matthias last week, and we talked about some of that as well. I'll put that episode in the show notes as well. In 2012, Apostle Neil Anderson taught there's an important principle that governs the doctrine of the church. The doctrine is taught by all 15 members of the First Presidency. It's not hidden in an obscure paragraph of one talk. True principles are taught frequently, and by many are doctrines not difficult to find. So I think what they're trying to say here is that if you find one talk that says one thing, you shouldn't really pay too much attention to it unless it's corroborated by the other talks from the other apostles, which really contradicts what they tell us anyway. It's like if there is an obscure thing in an obscure paragraph somewhere, please call it out, put it on a website somewhere and say, hey, this one thing that this one apostle said a long time ago, we don't really want to encourage this teaching or this belief. But instead of doing that, what they do is they scrub the talk from the website and they delete the recordings from the conference archives, and they just pretend like it never happened. Does this sound familiar, you guys? Sweeping things under the rug and pretending like things never happened? This is where my family got the idea to do it, is from the actual members, leaders of, sorry, not the members, the leaders of the LDS Church. Out of context. Similarly, church leaders have counseled against emphasizing statements from church leaders in the distant past that can contradict teachings by modern leadership. We honor and obey past leaders, but it's problematic to take a single obscure statement or idea out of its historical context and apply it to modern circumstances. 1 second. Okay, that was my lovely child. Apparently my next rabbit hole is going to involve some car repair, learning about car repair. So much fun. Okay. Okay, so we were talking about taking things out of context, and I realized I was probably being a little bit loud, so I'm going to try to calm down a little bit. It says if older teachings are still helpful, they're often quoted by modern leaders. So they're going back again to once again state that if a thing is not often quoted, then you should stay away from it. Recent teaching is the standard members should pay attention to. As Ezra Taft Benson, church president from 1985 to 1994, taught, the most important prophet, so far as we're concerned, is the one who's living in our day and age. This is the prophet who has today's instructions from God to us. God's revelation to Adam did not instruct Noah how to build the ark. Beware of those who would set up dead prophets against the living prophets, for the living prophets always take precedence. Now, I'm just going to take a moment here to point out to you that this quote is from a dead prophet. General Authority Alan D. Haney reiterated in April 2023, we do not use the words of past prophets to discount current prophets. I have a question. I have a genuine question. Does that include Joseph Smith? It's an honest question. Every time I hear them talk about not listening to past prophets, I'm like, okay, then we should completely get rid of the Doctrine and Covenants, which is the book of scripture that was the collection of Joseph Smith's revelations. And so if he's a past prophet and we should not be using his teachings to discount the teachings of our current prophets, then we should just get rid of that book entirely. And we should also get rid of the entire founding of the entire church because he's the deadest prophet of all the dead prophets. And by that, I just mean he was the first prophet. He was the founder of the church. And if we're not going to rely on past prophets, then do you see what I'm saying here? This is why this kind of stuff is so infuriating to me. Okay, moving on. An example. A specific example is Daybell's claim that he has experienced multiple mortal probations, a version of reincarnation. A very few statements from early church history can, if taken out of context, make a weak case that people are reborn into different identities, but literally no church leader after the late 19th century has even plausibly alluded to the concept, let alone taught it as truth. And literally every church leader has instead taught that every person follows the same course from pre-mortal life to mortality on earth to death and resurrection. Okay, guys, but is resurrection not another probation? Is pre-mortal life not another probation? If you believe that you lived somewhere before this life, that's a probation. If you lived on the earth, that's a mortal probation, right? If you die afterwards and there's an afterlife, that's another probation. That's all probation is like a period of time where you exist. So they literally do teach about multiple probations. And there's even a little couplet that goes, as God once was, man now is. And as God now is, man may become. That was a way of teaching that God had a mortal experience just like we did, and he proved himself to be faithful, and that's why he became God. And they teach us that we, if we prove ourselves faithful, can become like God. That is a mainstream core doctrine teaching of the church. And if you go to LDS.org and you search about this information, you can find it. So, okay. For an in-depth debunking of the idea of multiple mortal probations, see this article. I'm going to click on it because I'm guessing it's going to be another article by Fair Mormon. Oh, look at that. It's another article by Fair Mormon. Okay. As Elder Anderson taught, we shouldn't look in obscure sources for truth and understanding. It's not obscure when it's right there on your website. And as President Benson taught, who's a dead prophet, by the way, obscure statements from long ago never override more recent teachings. So really, this statement by Ezra Taft Benson should not override anything that's taught today, because he said this, and he's a dead prophet. And so guys, I'm confused. I just don't, I don't know. I'm trying really hard not to be snarky, because I don't want to alienate people who are members of the LDS Church. And I will say this too. I should have given this disclaimer right at the very beginning. It is never my intention to destroy someone's faith. Going through a faith crisis was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to go through in my entire life. It was horrible. It was so hard. It was every gamut of the full range of grief emotions that you can possibly imagine. It lasted a long time. And the grief still comes up for me all the time. I would not wish that kind of an experience on my worst enemy. I would not. I don't ever want to destroy somebody's faith, but I do believe in telling the truth. I believe in informed consent. And one of the reasons why I resigned from the church is because what I have been taught as a child and a teenager and a young adult, and what I myself taught when I was a gospel doctrine teacher for 6 years in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the things that I taught, I found out later were not accurate. I found out later that history had been scrubbed and whitewashed, and things had been covered up and hidden, and that there's literally a vault in the building in Salt Lake City where they keep documents they don't let anybody see because they don't want anybody to know. That is not informed consent. When the missionaries go out and teach people, when they knock on your door, those bright young men and women who my heart goes out to because they sacrificed the best years of their life to go out and teach people about Jesus Christ, they think. But they don't teach about polygamy. They don't teach about Black people not being allowed to receive the priesthood until 1978. They don't teach that Joseph Smith married a 14-year-old girl. They don't teach that he had over, I think it was 11 wives before he ever told his own wife about the concept of polygamy. And then when he did tell his own wife and she didn't like the idea, he came back and told her that he'd had a revelation that an angel with a flaming sword was going to destroy her if she didn't accept polygamy. I don't think that someone like that should be speaking for God. So while I don't want to destroy anyone's faith, I am going to tell the truth. I'm going to give the information that I know. And just so that you're aware, when I do research, I try to look at source documents. As you can see, I dove into this Fair Mormon article, and I wanted to know who they really were. Where is this information coming from? I wanted to know if it's legitimate, if it's credible. And I come to find out that the Fair Mormon organization, or Fair LDS as it's now called, is actually funded by a group that's funded by a group that's funded by a group that's funded by the LDS Church. We're going to get into that again in just a second over here. So back to the discussion about the Daybell case. It's simply false to say multiple mortal probations is church doctrine or taught by church leaders or believed by the vast majority of church members. For an in-depth debunking, see this article, which is a Fair Mormon article. Sorry if I'm repeating. The purpose of membership councils, and the reason they're talking about this is because a lot of people asked why weren't Chad and Lori excommunicated from the church if they were teaching things that were so contrary to church doctrine. And so this is answering that question, sort of, while being members of the church in good standing. The answer is that restriction or withdrawal of church membership, which, by the way, they don't call it excommunication anymore. They call it withdrawal of church membership because that's definitely less abusive and difficult. It's usually not appropriate for cases of fringe beliefs. Membership councils are reserved for serious sins like murder and abuse. I'm just pausing because is this not murder and abuse? Apostasy is a basis for a membership council, but Daybell and Vallow's beliefs were in a gray area. Tell us more. They publicly promoted fringe beliefs, but church policy is to only hold a membership council for apostasy if the member repeatedly acts in a clear and deliberate public opposition to the church, its doctrine, its policies, or its leaders. Okay, repeatedly. How many times? Because how many conferences did they have? How many books did they write? How many podcasts did they make? Persists in teaching as church doctrine what is not church doctrine after being corrected by the bishop or stake president. Okay, so they're going to use this little loophole and they're going to say, oh, look, shows a pattern of intentionally working to weaken the faith and activity of church members. Oh no, they were trying to strengthen people's faith, but like on the edge of the church. It says members of the church have freedom to study and interpret the gospel in eccentric ways. Wow, this is just a stunning statement to me. We have the freedom to study and interpret the gospel in eccentric ways. So we're allowed to interpret the gospel to be whatever we want. We're allowed to be eccentric in our beliefs. Yes, as long as you don't say it out loud or publicly, and as long as your bishop doesn't find out. That's basically what they're saying. Daybell and Vallow's teachings were not from a position of authority in the church. Yes, we've made that very clear. Chad Daybell was never made bishop, and they did not publicly advocate murder or other crimes so far as we know, except for probably in the private forums on the AVOW website. At the local level where decisions about excommunication are made, they use the word. Church leaders are volunteers who may not have time to review everything their members are writing and saying. So yes, I will say that Chad Daybell's bishop probably wasn't on the AVOW website. He probably didn't know what was going on. But Heather Daybell specifically says in her interview on Hidden True Crime that she went to the church leadership and she warned them about what was going on with Chad. I don't know how specific she was about what exactly was being said, but the fact that everybody was moving to Rexburg, that they were saying that there was going to be some big earthquake that was going to happen, that was going to destroy everything, and that the gathering place was Rexburg, and there was going to be a call out to white tent cities. You guys, she told that to the bishop. So the bishop knew that Chad Daybell was teaching things that were not in line with the mainstream Mormon teachings. The bishop knew. So you can't use this as an excuse to say, oh, the bishop probably didn't know. He did know. Maybe he didn't know what to do with that information. But it goes back to my my thinking about, our bishops in the LDS church they don't receive a lot of training. They're lay people. His bishop could have been a landscaper. And what is a landscaper going to do when he finds out that one of his members is teaching kooky stuff? Probably tell the stake president. And what's the stake president going to do? He's going to say, well, is he, handing out flyers? Is he, gathering groups of people? Yeah, he was. But like in his kitchen, they were podcasting to a group of, I don't know how many hundreds of people, but they weren't being super open about it. They were doing it in secret, which is even worse because then it's harder to track them down and pin things on them. So please don't use this excuse of the bishop didn't know, because he didn't know. And he should have at least been disciplined by the bishop. The bishop at least should have called him in and had a conversation and said, look, you can't be talking about this kind of stuff. The following essays place into context some of the claims of Vallow-Daybell and show how they are extreme misinterpretations of church doctrine. It is our hope that church members, journalists, and other interested individuals can use these materials to understand the church teachings, if actually followed by Vallow-Daybell, would have prevented these heinous crimes. So then this is where you get all of the information about the Davidic servant, end times prophecy, multiple mortal probations, and preparing a people, which is where we're going next. I just want to point out, though, again, this website is run by people who are being controlled by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it's very obvious to me that they're doing their very best to distance themselves and to say this has nothing to do with us. So the conference that Chad and Lori met with was a Preparing a People conference. It was founded and mostly attended by members of the church, but it was never affiliated with the church in any way. Again, this is their main object, is to distance the church. Its teachings were often on the fringe of church beliefs or in outright violation of church teachings. Again, no affiliation with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They were speakers and podcasters for a group called Preparing a People. Now, I want to note here that the founders of Preparing a People were Mike and Nancy James. You may have noticed their names came up in testimony during the trial just a little bit ago, a couple of days ago, because Nancy James was on a list of people who was named dark. So Chad was not the only one that was talking about light and dark. And my whole point in bringing all of this up is that these conferences and these groups are still out there and they need to be exposed. There's going to be more of this to come. It's now difficult to find information about Preparing a People because its leaders removed most of its online footprint in the wake of the murders, and by the way, also changed their names to Latter-day Media. And here they are, just right here, with lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of episodes that you can choose from by the same people who were in line with Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, and we're allowing them to speak at their conferences, and we're allowing them to speak on these podcasts right here. But none of these podcasts are going to have Lori and Chad because they've gotten rid of them. But if we scroll all the way down to kind of the beginning of this was in 2000, January of 2000, right around the time that Lori was arrested is when this all came out right here. If you look here, there's some panel discussions, and then some interesting names come up here. Avraham Gileadi, Timothy Ballard, Operation Underground Railroad founder, who has since been membership withdrawn from the Church of Jesus Christ in a very, very public way, and who is currently facing many, many lawsuits over women who have accused him of alleged sexual misconduct. Let's just put it that way. Ken Krogh, James and Hannah Stoddard. Some of you guys may not know these people, and I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into them and do some more information about them. But I want to say James and Hannah Stoddard, there is a YouTube episode that was put out by True Crime Underground, and I will link the episode in the show notes to this, where Hannah Stoddard, who is one of the people who runs the Joseph Smith Foundation, she was caught on tape verbally abusing her family, essentially, and being very manipulative. And she likes to try and play the card that it's not her in this recording, but it's a pretty damaging recording. So Again, Joseph Smith Foundation and Latter-day Media are another two of these fringe groups that have conferences, and they've got lots of followers, and they've still got a following out there. And they essentially agreed with a lot of the things that Chad Daybell was teaching. Now, am I implying that any of these people are going to commit murder? No, I'm not. However, these harmful fringe groups are particularly difficult for people who have a tendency towards toxic personality traits or any kind of mental illness. So, out of the percentage of people that belong to a fringe group, I would like to defer to Dr. John Matthias on this, but what's the likelihood that there's a higher percentage of people with personality disorder traits in a fringe group like this? Because the mainstream, the whole point is the mainstream Mormon church was not enough for these people. Going to church on Sunday for 2 hours and giving hours and hours of service to this organization and studying the voluminous scriptures, these things took up my entire life when I was a true believing member. I spent a large portion of my days and weeks and months in serving in my church callings and studying the materials of the church so that I could be a good and faithful contributor. That wasn't enough for these people. All of those hours and studying and everything, that wasn't enough. All the information that's been put out by all of the church leaders over the couple of hundred years that the church has been in existence, almost 200 years, wasn't enough for these people. They decided to go out and try to get more information. They decided to go out and try to understand more than what's being taught by the person they consider to be a prophet of God. So I just want you to understand the mentality of people that belong to these groups. They believe that they have a man in Salt Lake City who talks directly to God, but that information isn't enough for them. They want to go out to other sources and discuss other ideas and other topics that are not part of the mainstream church. These are not the mainstream LDS members. Mainstream LDS members, for the most part, are really good and kind and wonderful people. Even a lot of the leaders are really good and kind and wonderful people. But there also are a lot of harmful people. And there are also a lot of abusers, as we know. But the fringe groups take, I'm sorry, the kookiest people out of the mainstream church and get them all together. And there's a lot of them. And so this is what I think is problematic. And we're going to just go a little bit farther down this rabbit hole just so you can understand a few more things. So they say, of course, that preparing a people, no way affiliated, never endorsed, never attended or spoke at. As far as I can tell, that's probably true. Church's website is never linked to their material. It was founded by members of the church on their own initiative for their own purposes without any church involvement. I actually believe that that's probably true. The origin of the name refers to a task of becoming ready for Jesus Christ's second coming. End times preparation is a big deal in the church. But it says church leaders focus almost exclusively on ordinary righteousness and charity and hardly at all on sensational calamities when teaching about the preparation for a second coming. I can attest to this. Actually, this is true. When I was teaching gospel doctrine and we ever had a lesson about the second coming and the calamities and things that are foretold in the scriptures, both the Bible and the Book of Mormon about the second coming, the lesson manual always counseled us to focus on the teachings of Jesus and focus on the scriptures and to not go astray into talking about what might happen or speculating what we might need in order to be ready for that time. I will say, however, the church did put a large emphasis on having a year's supply of food storage. And I think what preppers did was they took that 10 steps farther. And they were like, well, if it's good for us to have a year's supply of food, then we should also have fuel. We should also have ammunition. We should also have shelter. We should also have generators and all kinds of different things. And that is essentially the business model that Christopher Parrett built AVOW on. LDS AVOW, another voice of warning. That's the forum that Chad and Lori likely spoke on, communicated on prior to their meeting. And Mormon Stories does a wonderful episode with the daughter of the founder of AVOW. I'm going to link that in the show notes as well, so you can see that where she essentially exposes this as a money-making scheme and talks about some of his harmful beliefs, that he still believes in polygamy and things like that. So it's a very harmful group led by a very harmful person. Pairing of people focus on sensationalism rather than on doctrine. The leaders started the group despite there not being an obvious need for it. Church doctrine is enough, basically, is what they're saying. And we can prepare for his second coming just by following the doctrine. Outside groups aren't needed. It's in violation of the church's teaching. There's an inappropriate focus on dreams and visions. They call it priestcraft, or a way to charge money for a workshop to deliver one's visionary skills. The scriptures are clear that only prophets can receive revelation. Well, that's not entirely true. It says one's own revelation is only applicable to oneself. So that has kind of been the line from Salt Lake City, is that we don't really, you can't receive personal revelation for the worldwide church or for other people, only for yourself and your family. Now, one could argue, if you're the leader of your family, you're Chad Daybell, and you're receiving revelation for your family, and you think that God has told you about this calamity that's going to happen and tent cities and call outs, you're going to teach that to your children. And there's also a scripture that says that when you have been warned, you should warn your neighbor. So I'm sure that that's how Chad took it to the next level of saying, okay, I taught my family about this. Now I feel like I need to tell other people. I need to warn my neighbors. Energy healing is against church doctrine. Yes, they did come out and say that. Specifically, the church handbook did specifically address that in 2020, not to participate in energy healing. But I mean, how do you define that, LDS Church? And, do you continue to promote that it's against that? Because again, according to your own stuff, if the apostles don't talk about it consistently, then it's not real, right? Fringe theories, Davidic servant, all of that kind of stuff, 144,000. So they're basically just trying to say, preparing a people is a fringe group, and you shouldn't listen to them. So I want to just go quickly over here to Fair Mormon Finances and read their apologetic about how they're funded. This is, again, Fair Mormon is making apologetic about their finances, but they're literally funded by a group who's funded by a group who's funded by a group who's funded by the LDS Church. So this is what they're going to say. Mission of Fair Mormon is to provide well-documented answers to criticisms of the doctrine, practice, and history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As such, we support fully the leadership of the church, its teaching and practices. That said, Fair Mormon is an independent organization that is not funded nor run nor even directed by church leadership. And as I showed you over here on this Blogspot article by David Twede, he has the receipts. That is a false statement by Fair Mormon. It says Mormon Trust, blah, blah, blah. Fair Mormon has received 2 donations from the More Good Foundation. One was a $2,000 donation that was part of a fundraising effort that was matched. The other was in 2018 when a $125,000 donation was made, which we were very grateful for because Fair Mormon was in financial difficulties at the time. At no time has the More Good Foundation ever told Fair Mormon what to do. They do, however, use some of our information in their videos. If you know that a church foundation is going to use your information in their videos, you're probably going to make sure that it's in line with church teachings so that they'll use more of your videos. The More Good Foundation is also an independent organization funded through contributions. According to their website, they operate several websites along with social media pages where persons of other faiths can learn about the church and where individual members of the church can share their beliefs. We also provide training and support for members interested in sharing their beliefs online. Training and support means money. Their website also states they're primarily funded by the generous donations of individuals and may also receive funds from trusts, corporations, and foundations, including the Deseret Trust Company and the Foundation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They do state, however, that they operate independently from the church, and the More Good Foundation is not managed or directed by the church. But again, If you're an organization that's spending a large amount of money to support and defend the church, they are definitely getting input from general authorities about how they should be spending that money and what they should be talking about and where they should be spending their time. I want to point this last thing out. Because the More Good Foundation has received donations from the Deseret Trust Company and the Foundation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there have been accusations that the church funds Fair Mormon. This would be like saying, if I made a large donation to the Red Cross and then Red Cross donates to Planned Parenthood, then I am funding Planned Parenthood, even though the donation from me came with no strings and I have no input on donations to Planned Parenthood. This is a stretch by anyone's definitions. Except that I want to point out this is the exact reason why members of the church have been told by some leadership, and I'm going to be vague about this on purpose because I don't have anything in writing, but I will say that in my personal experience, I heard from the pulpit more than once, and I heard from church leaders more than once, more than one church leader, specifically a bishop, that told me not to donate money to the United Way because the United Way funds Planned Parenthood. And if you're donating to the United Way, then you are funding abortion. I was literally told that as a true believing member by a bishop. Just putting that out there. Anyway, there is a ProPublica website that shows the IRS filings from the past 10 years. These documents show that over the past 10 years, Fair Mormon has received $736,000 from fundraising and donations and $366,000 from program services, mainly conference revenue and book sales. This is for 10 years. Expenses for that same period totaled $944,000. Okay, so you're telling me, let's do a little quick math, okay? So we have $730,000-ish and we have $366,000. Let's just call it $1 million. Okay. Over a 10-year period. That's $100,000 a year, right? Expenses for that same year were $944,000. That's almost $1 million. So basically everything that was coming in was going back out again. It says $0 went to compensation for board members, its president, or any apologist. Expenses include the conference center and other conference expenses, internet costs and accounting services, insurance, bookstore supplies, travel, website design and redesign, and as mentioned earlier, part-time administrative employees. So I just will say that part of my job as an executive at a fuel supply company is to negotiate contracts, and part of that negotiation of contracts is deducting of reasonable expenses. So when somebody says expenses include the conference center, okay, what are you doing there? Are you renting it? Are you renting it and then leasing it to another group so that they can use it for their conference? Is it a pass-through? What kind of expense is this? The conference center and other conference expenses. Anytime we see the word other in front of some kind of a vague expense, I want to know exactly what that is. List it. What are your other conference expenses? Are you paying for the travel? Are you paying for the hotel? What kind of hotel? Are you letting them stay at the Hilton, or are they staying at the Little America? Are they staying at the most expensive hotel in town, or are they trying to budget a little bit? Do any of their people bring spouses on these trips? Are the spouses required to pay any expenses on those trips? Other conference expenses is very, 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 very vague. That's all I'm saying. Okay. The rest of these seem pretty legit. Internet costs, accounting services, insurance, bookstore supplies. Again, what supplies from the bookstore? What bookstore? Are you buying your own personal books out of this? Are you including office supplies in those bookstore supplies? And are you using those supplies specifically only for this organization, or are you using them for other personal things? Interesting. Travel, again, what kind of travel? What kind of flights? What kind of airline? Are you paying for everybody? Are they flying when they could reasonably drive? All that kind of stuff. You know, these things are just pretty vague. That's all I'm saying. There's a lot of wiggle room in there. So what does it motivate those who volunteer their time and talents to do this organization? For most, if all, not all volunteers, it's out of the love of the gospel of Jesus Christ and a desire to help others receive the benefits of the gospel by providing faithful answers to the critical questions. And while the church does not fund nor direct this organization, again, questionable, the desire to support and defend the church are unapologetically the reason for its existence. Nobody at Fair Mormon is benefiting financially from defending the church. Questionable, but we hope that many benefit from our existence. So anyway, just to wrap up, come back all the way full circle. This all started because of the information that I received about Chad Daybell buying his first burner phone 2 weeks before he met Lori Vallow in person. And it is my suspicion that Lori and Chad communicated often and frequently on the AVOW website, which is a fringe group of the LDS Church, which has not been denounced by the church. Fair Mormon says that they sometimes are in violations of the church teachings, but then why haven't they been taken down? Fair Mormon says that Preparing a People is a fringe group. Fair Mormon says that they, again, are another group that teaches things that are contrary to the teachings of the mainstream LDS Church. We know that both of these groups are still functioning today. We know that the AVOW group has 20,000 followers and subscribers, 20,000. Now we know that Preparing a People changed into Latter-day Media. They're still obviously very actively podcasting with some unsavory characters. Again, teaching things that are not in line with the Mormon Church's teachings. You can't tell me that every single one of their bishops don't know what they're doing or saying. Why don't they excommunicate these people? There's another running theme in these groups, and it's that some of the people in these groups believe that the current leadership of the church is leading the church astray. They believe that the prophets are corrupt and that the church is in apostasy. These groups are full of people like Lori and Chad who think they are the ones with the answers. So leaders of the Mormon Church are trying to straddle both sides of an ever-widening, ever-deepening chasm. On one side, they have members who are calling for kinder treatment of the LGBTQ community. They're calling for the recognition of legal LGBTQ marriages by the church. They're advocating for women who hold the priesthood. They're asking for women to have parity in authority, when at the moment, they actually have no decision-making power, even in their own organization. The Relief Society, which they say is one of the largest women's organizations in the world, the leaders of that organization still have to get approval from a man, from one of the male leaders of the church, to make changes in their own organization, to even call personnel into their own organization. That's what some of these progressive members are calling for. They're asking for transparency in finances. They're asking for accountability for financial crimes. They're asking for background checks for leaders of youth organizations. They're asking for accountability for sex offenders. They're asking for the increased use of the church's wealth to support the poor and needy, and these people are being excommunicated. On the other side, there's a growing group of members who are faithful tithe payers and temple attenders who believe that the current leadership of the church has gone astray and that they're leading the church into apostasy. Are these people mocking the church? Are they lying in their temple recommend interviews? Are they saying that they sustain the brethren and then getting on the AVOW website and talking about how corrupt the leadership of the church is? They are literally arming themselves. They're learning to make their own ammunition and their own guns, and they're collecting guns for some kind of civil war or some kind of invasion that they're talking about. They're teaching about evil spirits inhabiting bodies. And they're joined, by the way, by a growing contingent of Christian nationalists who are not Mormon, but they also believe that there's going to be some kind of a civil war, and they're also arming themselves to the teeth, getting ready for it. So far, the LDS Church has chosen to excommunicate the progressive side, the kinder side, the LGBTQ side, the side asking for more transparency, and the side asking for you to protect children and behave more like the values they pretend to profess, like caring for the poor and needy. Meanwhile, JJ and Tylee were killed, and they turned a blind eye. So which is it going to be? Which side, LDS Church, are you going to excommunicate? Are you going to potentially anger the extremists, the AVOW people, the Preparing a People, the Joseph Smith Foundation people? Or are you going to continue to excommunicate the people who are calling for a healthier, kinder, more inclusive, more loving church that protects children? It's a rhetorical question, by the way. It benefits, I know they're not going to do it because it benefits them to stay silent in their literal ivory tower. They say to themselves, I'm taken care of. My family's taken care of. I've had the second anointing. I've had my calling and election made sure. So I can sit here and be silent and allow these two factions to fight with each other. And I know that both sides benefit from my silence, as do I. So I feel like that's the end of my rabbit hole for now. There's a lot more to investigate in these harmful groups, and there's a lot more calling out that needs to be done. And I am going to be hopefully partnering with some other people with louder voices than mine who are willing to speak up and to call out these groups, because this has been my fear all along. From the moment that I heard Vallow-Daybell give Alex Cox a blessing where he mentioned the Church of the Firstborn. From the moment that I heard that, I knew that there were more people out there with beliefs similar to Chad and Lori's. I know that not all of them are going to end up harming people, but one life lost is too many. And we have 4. So I'm calling for these groups to be denounced by the LDS Church by name. I'm calling for the church to disband these groups and to excommunicate anybody who is out there teaching fringe doctrine. I know it's probably a hopeless endeavor. I know they're probably not going to do it for the reasons I mentioned, mainly because if they excommunicate those people, they lose out on tithing dollars. They lose out on a lot of members who think that these groups are fine and that there's no problem with them. They lose out on anybody who thinks the church is already too controlling or going in the wrong direction. So I know they're not going to do it, but it is the right thing to do. It absolutely is the right thing to do. And as far as I'm concerned, the LDS Church is choosing membership and clout and tithing dollars over the lives of children and the protection of children. They've shown us who they are. Let's believe them. Go out and do something good for a kid who needs it. Go out and stand up for somebody who's marginalized. Go out and be a safe person for kids who don't have safe people in their lives. Thank you, guys.